Hello students and welcome to the e-learning program initiated by Shri Gyanmanjari Vidyapit for the students of Standard 10 in which we are learning the subject of social science. Students, from today we are going to start with chapter number 13, that is part of the geography section of this syllabus for 10th standard. So chapter number 13, this is the first lecture. Name of the chapter is Manufacturing Industries. Now, this is in continuation with lots of chapters that have been taught earlier. For example, we have chapter number 8, chapter number 9, chapter number 10, chapter number 11, plus chapter number 12. All of them, they can be reflected in uh, this particular chapter. Because if we see chapter number 8, different types of soils, etc., that is very, very necessary for agricultural crops. Plus, some of the soil types, they have a huge quantity of ores of different minerals. So that is the basis of this chapter. Because if we do not have agricultural products, then we will not have industries which are dependent on agriculture. Same way, different types of soil, having different types of minerals in them. If we have a very good and rich soil having lots and lots of minerals in them, that becomes the basis for industries that are dependent on minerals. From minerals, we get metal. There are numerous metals. So then refining of that ore into metal, and that metal is used by n number of industries in different ways, either to make raw material for somebody or to make products out of that metal and to be sold in the market. So here comes a little bit part of economics also, because manufacturing industry, that is and nowadays a very, very important part of the economy. You can consider manufacturing industries as the backbone of our economy. So let us study this chapter. The very first point is, what do we mean by an industry? Now, the first thing is, what do we understand by industry? See, we have lots of raw material in various forms. When we want something made out of it, we have to go through a process. So, going through the process of converting a raw material into product, where that process happens, that is industry. Now, it can happen in a cottage, it can happen in a small scale industry, it can happen in a large scale industry, right? So the process in which a man, sorry, process in which man, that is we, can change the natural resources into usable conditions. Suppose we have the hammer. Hammer is made out of two things. One is iron, one is wood. Both of them are natural resources. Both of them come from natural resources, because the head of the hammer, which is made out of iron, is got from iron ore. Iron ore, from iron ore we got iron, from iron we made the head of the hammer, that is made out of iron. Iron ore is found under the ground. It is a natural resource. Same way, the handle of the hammer is made out of wood. Then wood is, it's a natural resource. But it has to go through a process. First of all, we have to dig up the iron ore. first of all, we have to locate, identify which area has the maximum amount of iron in the soil. When we identify it, because soil 100%, out of that, what is the percentage of iron present in it? The soil which has maximum percent of iron in it, that is called iron ore. And then iron ore has to be kept in a furnace, blast furnace, and it has to be heated up to its melting point along with uh, coke and limestone. The bursting of coke and limestone separates the iron from the ore, that is impurities, right? Then we get iron. From that iron, we make iron ore. We make the head of the hammer. So it has to go through a process. Wood is available naturally as a tree, but then it has to go through a process of lumbering. That is, we have to cut down the tree, we have to separate the timber from it, and then the timber is then cut into small pieces as per requirement, and that is where we get the handle of the hammer. So the process in which we can change a natural resource into usable conditions according to it, according to the intellectual, cultural, and economic capacity, that is called industry. Now, three things are mentioned over there. In usable condition, according to the intellectual means there are many countries still where more than half of the population is still not educated. Setting up an industry over there, they will not get enough manpower to work in the industry. They will get laborers, but then we need lots of engineers. First of all, we have to build up that industry. We have to establish that industry. We need lots and lots of engineers. Now, that country does not have that many literate people, eligible people who can work, who can at least establish and then work on the machines, etc. Right? If there is a fault, they know where to look for and how to repair. So it depends upon the intellectual capacity of the people who are trying to convert a natural resource into some usable thing. Next is culture. Yes, if the culture is backward, if the culture is not advanced according to the time, if people have not changed, they have lived, for example, the tribal community living off in some far off island or some remote areas on some hilly area, they have been existing, they have been surviving, but there is no advancement in their culture. Orthodoxy is there. Children are not allowed to get education, right? So in this way, it depends upon the intellectual, cultural, and the economic capacity. A country must have enough funding with it, enough finance with it, that it can establish an industry. If there is nobody available, right, then the government can establish the factories, industries, and start production. But for that, the government also should be having money. If the people are illiterate, if there is no economic development in the country, right, then the country will be very poor, and the government of that country is going to be poor also. So all these three conditions are very, very necessary. If you want to put the natural resources into usable conditions, then you need intellectuality, you need cultural advancement, and we should have economic capacity. Then that is called industry. Now, importance of the industries, we know very well. Today's time, existence of nations largely depend on industries, right? Their output, because if they do the output, then the products are going to enter the market, people are going to buy them, like them, there is going to be a demand, so more production is going to happen. So transaction of money and churning of money happens, and that is how money gets in everybody's hand, and the economy of the country gets better and better. The same products can be sold outside, and very rich foreign exchange can be earned from it. So today we can say that industries, they are the backbone of the economy of any country. The more industrially countries develop, then that much sound economy it will have. So in today's time, the existence of nations largely depend on industries. It is impossible for any nation to achieve economic development without developing the industry. Without developing the industry, we cannot achieve economic development or economic progress, right? So it is very, very important. These industries, they are very, very important, because if we want to develop, if we want to progress, if we want to see economic growth, if we want to see economic development, then development of industries is very, very necessary for that country's economy, for the people of that country to be economically sound. The countries that have focused more on their industrial development have achieved high economic growth. We can take our example. When we got independence, our first focus was to have sufficient grain for us. Did we focus on industry? No, we focused on industry after we got a green revolution, when there was enough sufficient grain to feed our own people. So that 15, 20 years we have to live. We didn't have much development because industry, focus on industry was not there. Focus was on the increasing the capacity to grow more and more grain, so that we are at least self-reliant as far as food is concerned. First of all, we should have food safety, right? If food is not in the belly of the people working in the industry, then it's of no use, right? So the governments did good that just after we got the independence, they set the priority. First, we don't have food, so let us gather food. So when they gathered food, the next step was increase industrial production, right? So lots and lots of policies came out where industries got boosted. Then we centered and focused on industry, whereas lots of other countries, they were quite independent before us, and they focused on industry, and that is how they developed very speedily, because whole of their focus was on industry. So the countries that have more focused on their industrial development have certainly achieved high economic growth. Countries like Bangladesh, most of them, they are the developed countries, say US, Russia, Japan, they are the most developed countries in the world, South Korea, etc. They are prosperous and developed due to the high industrial development. In their countries, more focus, and only focus on industrial development has been done, so that people, for that, people have to be highly educated. Whole of the mass, whole of the public, all the population has to be highly educated for that. So not only industries develop, but rest of the sectors also develop together, because in order to cater to the needs of the industry, other sectors have to develop, right? So if you have money in your pocket, if these countries have money in the pocket, food can be bought from anywhere in the world, right? So that's not a problem. On the other hand, countries where the industries are either not developed or less developed, or are not able to utilize the natural resources properly and fully, they remain underdeveloped. Why? Because they did not understand the importance of industries. Of course, they also do understand the importance of industries, but then the governments are helpless, because more than half of the population is quite poor, more than half of the population is totally illiterate, food resources are not there. They have natural resources under them, the minerals, etc., but they do not have people to establish factories and churn out production from there, right? Even the government does not have that resources. So those countries where industries are either not developed or less developed, or they are not able to utilize their natural resources properly and fully, those countries always, they have to sell their natural resources at a cheaper price and purchase goods made from them for the same raw material from foreign countries at a very high price. We can take example of lots of African countries, nations which has a complete population of tribal people, where education does not exist. The tribal people are continuously at war with each other, cutting each other's throats just because they do not belong to the same tribe. Lots of war is going on, and lots of strife is between the government and the people. Governments keep on changing. No stable government is there. In such a chaotic condition, the country remains poor for number of decades, because improvement is just not happening, development is just not happening. So what happens, their only source of income remains what is under their ground, that is the minerals that are under the ground. They have to sell it to foreign countries at a very very cheap rate, because whatever rates are available to them, they have to accept it and allow the foreign countries to mine their countries, take away the rich mineral resources at a very cheap rate. Now those countries that take those rich minerals from these very poor countries, they process them, because they have industries, they process that raw materials into finished products and then come back again to that country to sell that products. Yes, our country our country has witnessed these things very very well. Cotton we produced, and the Britishers took away the cotton to England, and in their mills, because we didn't have mills at the time, so what happened, in their mills they manufactured textile cloth, and that textile cloth they brought in India. Now cotton they took from India at a very cheap rate, forcibly or anyhow, and when they took it to England and processed it into textile, when they came and sold in India, it was costly. We had to buy because we didn't have any alternative. Yes, so in this way, the poorer countries, they have to face beating on both the sides. First of all, they do not get a good price for the raw material. Second, the same raw material is processed in foreign countries, and the finished products are again sold to them with a very high price. In India, manufacturing industries contribute very very important national production. In national production, the contribution of industries, manufacturing industries, their contribution in national production is 29%. Please remember the number, 29%. Almost 30% of contribution of a national production comes from manufacturing industries. A very important point to note over here. Industrial development started very late in India. This is a give reason. Yes, it's already available in your material. So industrial development started very late in India. We know the reasons, because for 200 years we were under the British rule, and we could establish only those industries where the Britishers gave us permission, right? Moreover, the raw materials were taken away from India and processed in the factories that were established in England, and then the products were sold in India at a very high price, or we got the products because we didn't have any alternative, because those things simply disappeared from Indian market, and the rules and principles and regulations set by the Britishers didn't allow our industry to go. All these we have already learned in the previous standards also. When the industrial revolution took place in the world, India was under the British rule. Now, uh, assumed that the industrial revolution started first in England, that is around 1850. Now, at that time, 1850, we know 1857 revolt. That was the first revolt. By that time, India was completely occupied by the British rule. Many parts were under the control of the Portuguese, French, etc. So, we can say most of India was under the British rule. At that time, industrial revolution started in England, 1850, right? 20 years later, it reached Europe. So even Europe had a industrial revolution around 1870. But we know that it took us more 100 years. 1850, we got independence in 1947. So almost 100 years we lost, because the British rule was upon us, and they didn't allow lots of our industries to get established. They made certain that such rules and regulations were enforced, which discouraged Indians to establish industries. And because then, if we are establishing our own industry, then who is going to buy their products, right? So they made such regulations, rules, laws. So we were disheartened or discouraged from establishing our own business. Then also some development happened, but that happened quite late. British made very unjust policy that Indians could not start or develop industries, right? According to their policy, all the raw materials should be taken from India, or and it should be processed in England, and again the finished product to be brought in India to be sold, so that they get a ready market for the things to sell. Now, because of this, they had to make certain by making such laws where Indians cannot develop or establish industry. So British made very unjust policies so that Indians could not start or develop industries. Now, next point is, then also the first charcoal based iron melting industry started as early as 1853, but it failed because of the British policy. It is not that lots of people tried, right, to establish industry. This is one of the first type. It ran on charcoal. Now charcoal बोलने में बहुत सीधा होता है, लेकिन उसका कोल बनाने का process, it is made out of wood. The wood is half burnt, so it becomes black. All the water content from the wood evaporates, and only carbon remains in the wood, right? So it becomes very lightweight. It gives lots of amount of heat. Now, the first iron smelting or iron melting industry was established way back in 1853. But because of the British policies, it had to close down quite quickly. So, the first charcoal-based iron melting industry, we have to remember that iron industry is considered among the heavy industries, because lots of machinery, lots of furnaces, lots of fuel goes in it, lots of ingredients are needed to purify iron, or to separate iron from the impurities. So lots of input is there, right? And it becomes expensive. So charcoal based iron melting industry was started in 1853, but because of the British policy, it was closed down quite quickly. The British, next point is, the British used to buy raw materials that we have already got understood with the help of the cotton, right? So the British used to buy raw material at cheap prices from India. We can understand cotton was grown in India. Our farmers should be benefiting from it, but our farmers were exploited, and cotton was bought from them by the Britishers or the traders at a very, very cheap rate, and that was exported to England. Produce goods from them in England. So we already know the process. The cotton was taken from here to England. They had already factories established over there, because industrial development started happening in 1850 and it boomed over there, right? So they had set up lots of industries producing textile. So cotton was the need of the time. They took cotton from our Indian farmers at a quite cheap rate and took it back to England. The people in England, that means workers in England, the people who established the industry over there, they profited from the cotton that was cheaply bought from India, processed in their factories, and now who is going to buy those products? India is a huge country with a huge population, already under the control of the Britishers, so they had a ready market with us, and they brought their finished products to India and sold them. So who actually earned the profits? Britishers. Who went from bad to worse condition? The cotton growers in India, that is the farmers, the weavers, because now nobody is buying their cloth. The weavers, the local weavers who were weaving cloth according to the demand in the market, now nobody buys that cloth because ready-made cloth is available in the market brought from British, and sell those goods back in India. As a result, the local industry could not survive or develop in India, because weavers, they had lots of work to do, because textile is always in demand. Yes, people are wearing to wear clothes, and they are growing. The demand is always growing. So there was lots of work for the weavers, but because of the harsh policies adopted by the Britishers, they laid heavy taxes on the weavers. So weavers literally did not have any profit from making textile or cloth. So they left that business, and they ran away from the villages and settled in the nearby towns and cities and started doing labor work, or they picked up any other profession because their profession was not earning money. So now we were out of the local cloth that was made by the weavers. So we also did not have any other option. So we also started buying the cloth that was imported from England, and we had to buy it, right? There was also several bans on Indians for producing several goods and setting up industry. Yes, we just discussed about that. Several bans were there where Indians were not allowed to do production because that swarm production is coming from England, or the Britishers are selling them. So if we are producing them, nobody is going to buy their goods. So certain regulations were made, certain laws were made, and we were heavily taxed, and some bans were also there where we were not allowed to make production, because if we make the production, then the producers in England, they would not be having the profit, because then nobody will buy their cloth. So in this way, the Britishers imposed lots of bans, rules, regulations, laws, and saw to it that our people, Indians, they did not, uh, they are not able to establish industry, or even if their industry is there, then the industry will break down in a little bit of time, and people will be out of business, and proper care will be taken that no new industry come up, there is no development. Owing to all these reasons, India's industrial backbone, that is the people who are setting up the industries, people who are working in the industry, all of them became jobless, out of work, and the industry shut down. Then India's backbone, that is the industrial output, that stopped. During the British rule, so India could not start industrial development as early as other developed countries. Other developed countries, they started along with the British, because as we discussed, 1850 industrial uh, revolution came in England. After 20 years, it spread to the European countries, and from there, after on, it spread to the rest of the world. So each and every one country was developing. But India and many other countries who were under foreign rule, or who were quite poor, they did not get the benefit of the industrial revolution, and industrial revolution came to their country quite late, whereas all the developed countries till then had developed even more, and they were India was quite rich and prosperous in its industry. Now we come to a flashback. Yes, we know right since the time of Indus Valley civilization, and even before that, India is a land of rich culture, rich traditions, rich customs, and we have knowledge of science and technology since the ancient time, mathematics, lots of discoveries has been made. All of that is true. But our industries had developed since a long, long time, until we got uh, under the rule of the Britishers. In India, the industrial traditions are as old as time of the Indus Valley civilization. Lots of proof we have that industries existed at that time also, 5,000 years ago. India used to produce cotton textile that we know, clay utensils, things of bell metal, beads. So all these industries, we already have proof that it existed during the Indus Valley civilization 5,000 years ago. So we are quite a hardworking people, peace-loving people, and we have lots of knowledge. We put that knowledge to use, and we establish industries according to the capacity of that time. But still, industries were developed, and people were prosperous. The land was prosperous, giving them lots of things, right? So people made use of their intellectuality, and people made use of their knowledge and the resources available with them, and they set up industries, and they sold the goods produced in that industry not only to the locals, but even went quite far away from India in order to sell those things and earn profit. So we already had not only industry but also trade set up, which made India more and more prosperous. India was able to also quite advanced in shipbuilding industry till 18th century. Till 18th century, we have proof that there were lots and lots of ships that were made in India, and which took lots of goods and material and people from India to lots of African countries, Arabian countries, which can be uh, which can be served as a proof that we not only had the shipbuilding industry, we made very good ship, and we were able to reach up till the far off countries like Arabian countries and do business with them. India was not only very good in producing handicraft but also exported it. We catered to the needs of the local people and we produced sufficient and sold it outside. And it got so famous that people from far away came and did business with us, the handicrafts that we produced. India also had well-developed cottage industry also. Yes, cottage industry, we already know the clayware that is made, that is cottage industry, the different handicrafts that are made, textile that was made. No machines were there. Everything was made in homes or small cottages, a small space available over there because machines were not there at that time. So we can say that whatever was available, resources were available to them according to their intellectuality and capacity, they did produce lots of things. In the ancient time, Indian cotton cloth, that is the muslin cloth, yes, we learnt about it in chapter number 2. Yes, it can be folded and put into a matchbox, or it can pass through a ring that we wear on the finger. Yes, it was, that is a cotton cloth. Muslin cloth is a cotton cloth. So, but it is made with such a fine expertise and with very good cotton that it was sold all over the world, and it was known as muslin cloth, which was made in Dhaka, that is today's Bangladesh. Metal utensils, we had lots of minerals under the ground. We identified them and we uh, purified them. We made metal out of it and made metal utensils, and we not only used it locally, but it was made and sold in other countries also. And ornaments were quite in demand. Yes, we were because India has very long coastline that we also learned in chapter number 2. That owing to that, diamonds, beads, etc., we find in abundance. We also had lots of gold, etc. So golden ornaments, silver ornaments, uh, ornaments made with beads, etc., they were in heavy demand, not only in the local market, not only in the country, but outside the country also. Traders from many countries used to travel to India to buy goods produced over here, that you have already learned in 9th standard also. Hence, we can say that India was quite rich and prosperous due to the industries that he had. And these first few industries of India and their setups, quite important. You should know which industry got started for the first time in India, when, where, that is the dateline and the place, right? Today the place might be in some another state, yes, because the boundaries of the state kept on changing for quite a long time. The first charcoal industry that we know, it was iron melting industry, was started as early as 1853, but it failed due to the British policies. This is also important, very, very important. The first cotton textile industry started in 1854 in India. A jute mill, yes, jute में से भी garments बनते हैं, lots of um, other things are made from jute, right? So textile, rope, etc. is made from it. Lots of other useful things are made from jute. So jute mill was established in 1855. Two, three things you have to remember: jute mill, 1853, Risra, and where it is. These are the 3, 4 things that you should remember. Uh, Lots of memorization you will have to do in this chapter. Yes, it not only it's a very good question. It's a very good chapter to create lots of objectives from this chapter. Yes, because of the dates available, places available, and where what is found, which industry is developing where or has developed, or the centers are over here. So lots of objectives can be produced from this, generated from this chapter, very important. So please keep on marking in your material also. Next, 1874, India's first blast furnace was established at Kulti, West Bengal, for making iron from ore, which was closed after a few years. It was restarted in 1881. Now, please remember, the first blast furnace, 1853, charcoal based iron melting industry was established. Yes, after 20 years, that is 1821 years, 1874, the first blast furnace, yes, the furnace in which iron ore is dumped along with charcoal, along with coke and limestone, and a high degree heat is given in the furnace, and the iron reaches its melting point and the coke catches fire, limestone is present over there, and it blasts. Because of that, iron separates from iron ore. That means iron one side and, or not one side, but iron is separated from the impurities. That is called a blast furnace. So after 20 years, first it was charcoal based. Yes, now other fuel is required to start this. So 1874, first blast furnace was established at Kulti, that is in West Bengal. For what? Doing what? For making iron ore. No, making iron from ore. And it was closed down after a very short time, few years. Again, it was restarted in 1881. That is exactly some 6-7 years later. It was again restarted. This is very important. Okay, now comes the most important part for as far as iron industry is concerned. 1907, Jamshedji Tata started Tata Iron and Steel Company. Yes, Tata Iron and Steel Company, TISCO. In short, known as TISCO. Full form is Tata Iron and Steel Company. In 1907 at Jamshedpur, and open new ways for India. Right? This was one of the first private iron and steel industry that was established in India. Please remember 1907. Jamshedji Tata, he established TISCO, that is Tata Iron and Steel Company. He bought huge fields where a very rich iron ore having high percentage of iron was present. He bought all of that land, established the furnaces at Jamshedpur, which has a river going nearby it, because we need lots of water also. Mostly the industries, they use lots of water. So iron ore was found nearby, water is found nearby, and very soon TISCO, that is Tata Iron and Steel Company, started producing iron and steel in a very huge quantity. Now, the important point to note over here is after 1907, TISCO started producing iron and steel in huge quantity, right, and catered to the local needs. And at that time, the Britishers were laying the network of railway tracks. They needed lots and lots of iron, right? So they got a ready-made seller in India rather than importing iron from British all the way. It becomes quite costly. So now TISCO got the credit of selling iron to the British companies who were laying down railway tracks in India and enlarging the railway network in India. TISCO got another benefit in 1914, because in 1914 First World War started and the British were the part of the allies that were fighting against Germany. You have already learned that in the previous standard, right? Now, what happened? Now, Britishers are at war with Germany, along with France and lots of other countries. They were fighting against Germany. Now, because of the war going on, their industries were completely destroyed in the war. the Germans, they bombarded France and went up to England and also uh, created lots of destruction over there. So in England, the industries were all closed down, and we know in war, country needs lots and lots of iron. Now the iron is completely, the iron making industry is completely destroyed in England, and because of the war, the iron ore from India cannot be exported to England. And even if it goes over there, the industries are completely destroyed over there, right, by the bombarding. So what happens is England needs iron, and where will it get iron? So it got iron from Tisco, right? So this is one of the biggest benefit that Tisco got just after getting established, right? And it has developed quite a lot after that. So it यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ है, it opened up new ways for India. That is the meaning of it. How Tisco benefited because of the British rule in India, and it was able to sell whatever it produced in India. The textile industry of India was ruined under the British rule. Now we again come back to that cotton. We already know the story, right? So let us go to it in brief. When the Industrial Revolution took place in the world, India was under the British rule, so they did not allow the industries to develop in India, because industries were already developing and working at a very high pace in England. So if industries develop over here, then nobody will be taking their products. For that, they very systematically and meticulously, they destroyed the textile industry in India. First thing is, take the cotton as cheap as possible from the farmers, right? So the farmers, they have to grow cotton, and their only buyer is the Britishers, right? Next, the weavers. Heavy tax was laid on them, and they are not able to pay such a lot of tax and even survive after that. So they had to leave their profession and run away from there, right? So the handloom or the textile that was produced by the weavers, that stopped. Yes, cloth, textile is always in demand. Yes, people need clothes to wear. So now from where they are going to get the clothes? The answer was ready. The cloth will be imported from England. The cotton raw material was exported over there. Those people earned the profit, and our industry got ruined. British made very unjust policies so that Indians could not start or develop industries. The British used to buy raw cotton and other fibers at cheap prices from India, produce goods from them in England, and sell those goods back in India. This ruined our Indian textile industry. Textile industry had no option but to shut down. So those who were attached with the textile industry, because textile industry is so huge, lots of employment is generated in that industry, right from cotton growers, then comes the ginning work, then comes the yarn, that is spinning of that cotton and turning it into thread. So lots of people get employment because of that. Then there comes the whole group of people that are in the dyeing business. First of all, you have to produce dye of different colors, right? And then you have to dye the threads with that color according to the demand of the people. Now, then there are weavers who weave the cloths. Sometimes they weave the cloth white, and then the cloth has to be dyed. So lots and lots of people are employed in the industry. Now, when the weavers stop doing that work, rest of the people become unemployed, because nobody is buying their material, right? There is no cloth to be made, so no dyeing work is to be there, no textile is made, so the ginning work or the yarn making work, whole of that system breaks down, and people are out of work. So textile industry had no option but to shut down. Unemployment and poverty increased. Thus the textile industry in India was ruined under the British rule. Now we come to the main point of today: classification of the types of industry with the help of a chart. The chart is already given in your material. We'll just understand the layout. Okay, industrial industries, they are based on what? They have to be based on something, right? So they are based on three things. First is human labor. Next is ownership. And the third one is source of raw material. Now we'll understand them one by one. If industries are based on human labor, then large scale and small scale. Small scale, we understand. What is small scale? Very few people are engaged in that industry. The industry will be using very less machine, very less electricity, very less water. The capacity of the owner of that industry is not that much, so he will buy only a little bit of the raw material, and he will process it. He just has few labors to process it, few machines. So the output is also small. When he sells that in the market, then he has again money to buy more raw material. So it is a small scale industry. On the opposite, large scale industry, more and more human labor, and all types of human labor is there, right from the person who is picking up the load on his head to the manager or owner of the factory. Everybody is working in it, and there are lots of people working in that same unit. Plus they have lots of money to buy lots of raw material. Lots of machines are there. You need a big space to establish that industry. You need lots and lots of large rooms where these big machines costing in lakhs of rupees, they are there. They use a large amount of electricity and a large amount of water, large amount of manpower, large amount of capital. All of this is in quite huge quantity. So it's a large scale industry. Coming to ownership, we know either it will be private or it will be public. But here we have three. Ownership is either on the private basis or it will be public industry. Public industry will always be under the complete control of the government. There is a section in that also. It can be public or it can be semi-public. That means private and government, they will have some partnership in that. We'll come to that later, but we'll just understand that. Ownership, either it will be public or it will be government control, right? Then there is a third one, cooperative. Few people get together. Yes, सबने 500 रुपये डाला, right? अगर 10 लोग हैं तो 5,000 रुपये इकट्ठा हो गया. You can buy small machines out of it, some raw material, and start work. That is cooperative. The profit is distributed equally among all the people, right? Cooperative. So three types: ownership, private, public, and cooperative, based on raw material. We have discussed this earlier. या तो agriculture होगा या तो mineral होगा, right? So depending upon the source of raw material, it will be either agricultural based. Yes, for example, the biscuits that you have, the wafers that you have, potato wafers. पोटैटो नहीं होगा तो पोटैटो वेफर नहीं हो सकता. सेम वे wheat नहीं होगा तो बिस्किट नहीं हो सकता. So those industries are completely based on agricultural products. So they are called agro based industry. Same way minerals, जैसे कार है, yes, एल्यूमिनियम भी है उसमें, प्लास्टिक भी है, leather upholstery भी है, whole of the frame is made out of iron, right? So lots of minerals are used in manufacturing the car. So that car manufacturing unit is completely mineral based, right? Because first of all you should have iron from iron or from aluminum, or you got to have aluminum so that you can make the body. Then you need glass. Now to make glass you need natural resources. So they are all dependent on minerals. So industry is divided into three types: human labor, ownership, and source of raw material. If you're talking about human labor, then that is large scale and small scale. If you're talking about ownership, who owns that industry, it can be privately owned, it can be owned by the government, or it can be a cooperative industry. For example, Amul. Source of raw material, it can be either, only two. Either it has to be agro-based industry or it has to be mineral-based industry. So students, we would stop over here for today. Thank you.